The autumn wind of Chicago gently caressed Rebecca Hamilton's face. She worked as a nurse at a large general hospital in the city. With over 10 years of experience, her hands were accustomed to easing patients' pain. At 7 in the evening, her steps were tired as she left the hospital after a long shift, but her heart felt light. Today, she had plans to visit her sister Amanda with her husband David. When she opened the door to her home, the delicious aroma of dinner wafted from the kitchen. David was a lawyer specializing in family court. His work was never easy. Divorce mediation, custody battles, family property disputes, his daily routine involved dealing with people in the most difficult phases of their lives. However, no matter how hard his day had been, he always greeted Rebecca with a smile when she came home. "Welcome home, honey," David embraced his wife while still wearing his apron. "How was your day?" "Busy, but seeing patients get better and go home makes it all worthwhile." Rebecca buried her face in her husband's warm chest. "What time were we supposed to meet Amanda again?" "We're supposed to go to her apartment around 8. Mark should be there too." Amanda had a bright, sociable personality and worked at a popular beauty salon in town. Trusted by her customers and always maintaining a cheerful demeanor, she was like sunshine within the family. 2 years ago, she married Mark Wilson, who worked for a construction company. Mark was an honest, hard-working man, and it was obvious to everyone that he truly loved Amanda. Their wedding was a warm affair, surrounded by relatives and friends from both families. Rebecca shed tears when she saw Amanda in her wedding dress. David also cherished Amanda like his own sister. Mark, in turn, accepted Rebecca and David as his real family. 6 months after their marriage, Amanda announced her pregnancy. The entire family was overjoyed. Mark especially couldn't hide his excitement about becoming a father. He looked forward to shopping for baby supplies and spent weekends preparing the baby's room. During Amanda's pregnancy, even during the difficult morning sickness period, Mark devotedly cared for her. "Mark really is a wonderful husband," Rebecca said to her husband. "Seeing Amanda so loved and happy makes me happy too." "Yes, he is. He's an honest man," David smiled. "He's serious about his work and truly cherishes Amanda."
Can you imagine making $10,000 a month just from YouTube, all from home? That's exactly what I did with Reddit Stories. No face, no voice. Check the link in the description if you're curious.
Sometimes he's unreachable due to construction site work, but that's just proof of his dedication to his job. Indeed, Mark was sometimes too busy. Because he was working on large construction projects, he was often called to the site even on weekends. Amanda would say with a laugh, "My husband is too responsible for his own good," but there was pride in those words. On the way to Amanda's apartment by car, Rebecca reflected on her relationship with Amanda. The two had been close since childhood, and whenever Amanda had troubles, she would always consult with Rebecca. Even after marriage, this relationship hadn't changed. During her pregnancy, Amanda frequently called Rebecca, sharing her anxieties and joys about becoming a mother. She said she wanted to talk about baby names today, Rebecca said to her husband. She mentioned Mark Jr. for a boy and Emily for a girl, David answered while driving. "I think both are lovely names." When they arrived at Amanda's apartment, Mark greeted them at the entrance. His face looked tired, but he wore a warm smile welcoming the family. "Rebecca, David, thank you for coming," Mark welcomed them with embraces. "Amanda has been looking forward to your visit." In the living room, 8 months pregnant Amanda sat on the sofa, gently stroking her belly. Her face glowed with the radiance of pregnancy, wearing a blissful expression. "Rebecca, David." Amanda tried to stand up, but Rebecca hurried over to her. "Don't strain yourself, just stay seated," Rebecca took Amanda's hand. "How are you feeling?" "Very well. The baby is moving actively too," Amanda smiled happily. "Mark talks to my belly every day. He's going to be a wonderful father." That night, the 4 of them enjoyed a wonderful time together. They discussed preparations for childbirth and made plans for the baby. The family bond was deep, and everyone eagerly awaited the arrival of the new family member. Chicago was entering the cold season. With 1 month remaining until Amanda's due date, the entire family was spending a busy but happy preparation period. Rebecca was adjusting her work schedule at the hospital and processing vacation time for several days before and after the birth. Her colleagues also blessed Amanda's upcoming birth and promised to support her whenever needed. When I talked to the head nurse, she told me to contact her anytime in case of emergency, Rebecca reported to her husband. If Amanda goes into labor, I can rush to the hospital immediately. David was similarly adjusting his work at the law firm. His specialty was family court cases, handling complex family issues like divorce mediation and custody problems. This work often involved emotionally heavy content, sometimes requiring him to prepare legal documents late into the night. However, for this important family event of Amanda's childbirth, he was coordinating with colleagues to adjust his caseload. I've arranged for my colleague James to take over next week's mediation, David told his wife. I want to be present when Amanda's baby is born. Meanwhile, Mark was eagerly preparing to become a father. Despite his busy work at construction sites, he found time to advance preparations for the baby. Assembling the crib, purchasing diapers and bottles, and decorating the baby's room, he tried to arrange everything perfectly. Mark is really meticulous, Amanda told Rebecca over the phone. Yesterday he came home from work and washed all the baby clothes, arranging them by size. They're organized as neatly as a store display. What a wonderful husband, Rebecca answered with a smile. David was the same way when our friends had babies. Men seem to become especially meticulous at times like this. Mark's job involved large commercial facility construction projects, and he held a responsible position. Therefore, he was sometimes called to the site even on weekends. Amanda initially felt a bit lonely when her husband left her alone during her pregnancy to go to work, but she gradually came to feel proud of his sense of responsibility. Mark says he wants to create a better environment for the baby, Amanda explained to her sister. So he's working hard to make this project successful and get promoted. I'm supporting him. Indeed, Mark worked diligently for his family. He was often at the site from early morning until late evening, sometimes traveling to construction sites in other cities. However, no matter how busy he was, he always accompanied Amanda to her prenatal checkups. Sitting in the obstetrics waiting room, looking at other pregnant women and their husbands, he would say with deep emotion, "We're going to be parents soon too." In mid-November, Amanda was scheduled for her final ultrasound examination. Rebecca and David also accompanied her to the hospital, watching the baby's image on the echo screen. The baby was developing well, and the doctor gave his seal of approval, saying, "The baby is in very healthy condition. We'll be able to meet soon," Amanda said tearfully while gazing at the screen. "You're going to be the best aunt this child could have." Of course, Rebecca squeezed Amanda's hand. "We'll always support you, so don't worry." On the way home from the examination, the four of them stopped at a baby goods store. Though Mark had already prepared most of what they needed, they chose newborn clothes together that Amanda really wanted to see. Holding the tiny clothes, Amanda smiled happily, saying, "Soon there will be a baby inside these." "You're going to be a wonderful mother," Mark said, putting his arm around his wife's shoulder. "I'll do my best to be the best father too." That night, Rebecca and David discussed at home about soon becoming an aunt and uncle. Though they had no children of their own, they vowed to love and raise Amanda's child as if it were their own. "I want us to be more than just relatives to this child," David said. "I want to be someone they can always rely on when needed." "Yes," Rebecca agreed. "Amanda is still young, and she'll probably be confused with her first experience of child rearing. We need to provide solid support." In early December, Amanda experienced mild false labor. Waking up in the middle of the night with abdominal pain, she frantically woke Mark. They headed to the hospital, but it turned out not to be real labor, and they returned home after a few hours. However, this incident made them realize that childbirth was truly approaching. "We're all ready now, so everything will be fine anytime," Rebecca encouraged Amanda. "We'll rush to the hospital too, so don't worry." Mark kept a hospital bag ready in the car, prepared to head to the hospital at any moment. His company colleagues also promised to cover the construction site for him in case of emergency. "Everyone is cooperating, and I'm truly grateful," Mark told Amanda. "I can focus only on you and the baby, so we can approach the birth with peace of mind." Then, on the early morning of December 10th, the moment finally arrived. Amanda felt real labor pains, and Mark frantically called the hospital. Receiving instructions to come to the hospital immediately, the two hurried to the hospital. At the same time, Rebecca and David were also contacted and rushed to the hospital. In the hospital delivery room, Amanda was bravely facing childbirth. Mark held his wife's hand, continuously offering words of encouragement. Rebecca and David waited in the waiting room, praying for a safe delivery as time passed. Then at 3:20 in the afternoon, a healthy cry echoed from the delivery room. Mark excitedly rushed into the waiting room, shouting, "He's born! A healthy baby boy!" Rebecca and David shed tears of joy as they embraced Mark. A happy moment celebrating the birth of a new family member brought warm air to the hospital. The next afternoon, Rebecca and David visited the maternity ward of Chicago General Hospital, carrying flowers and presents for the baby. The hallway echoed with newborn cries, and voices of families celebrating new life could be heard. Their hearts were filled with anticipation and joy. They had been too excited to sleep much the night before, but today was the day they would actually meet the baby. Room number 305, Rebecca confirmed the hospital directory while speaking to her husband. "Amanda might be tired, but she's probably looking forward to our visit." "Yes." From Mark's message, "Both mother and baby are doing well, so that's reassuring," David answered with a smile. "I can't wait to meet the baby." When they knocked on the hospital room door, Mark's cheerful voice could be heard. "Please, come in." Entering the room, Amanda was lying in bed with a tired expression, but her face glowed with the joy of becoming a mother. In her arms, a small baby wrapped in white blankets was sleeping quietly. Mark sat in a chair, watching over his wife and baby. His face was filled with the pride of becoming a father. "Amanda, you did wonderfully," Rebecca approached the bedside and gently kissed her cheek. "You really worked hard. The baby is so cute." "Thank you," Amanda showed a weak but happy smile. "This is Michael. We had planned on Mark Jr., but once he was born, Michael seemed like the perfect name." "Michael, what a lovely name," David said, looking down at the baby. "Hello, Michael. I'm your Uncle David." Mark stood up and proudly introduced the baby. "Look at how small his hands are. But his grip is very strong. Last night, when he grasped my finger, it felt like he didn't want to let go." "May I hold him?" Rebecca asked with sparkling eyes. Of course, Amanda carefully transferred the baby to her sister's arms. "Please support his head firmly." Rebecca lifted the baby with practiced hands. As a nurse, handling newborns wasn't unusual for her, but holding her own nephew brought special emotion. "He's so small and light, yet I can feel such strong life force. It's truly a miracle." "David, you should hold him too," Rebecca handed the baby to her husband. David received the baby carefully, though somewhat nervously. "Wow, he really is small. But in this tiny body, an entire long life is contained." He gazed intently at the baby's face. Michael was sleeping, but occasionally frowned slightly or moved his lips. David observed the baby's small hands and feet, and his facial features in detail. "What a cute child. Does he look like Mark?" "Everyone says so," Mark answered happily. "But I think I can see Amanda's features too." For a while, the hospital room was enveloped in a warm atmosphere. Amanda occasionally closed her eyes from childbirth fatigue, but smiled happily seeing her family surrounding the baby. Mark was taking photos and keeping detailed records of the baby's condition. "I couldn't sleep at all last night," Mark said with a laugh. Amanda was sleeping from exhaustion, but I was too excited to sleep even a wink. "I kept watching the baby the whole time." "All first-time fathers are like that," Rebecca answered gently. "But for Amanda's recovery, you need to get some rest too." David was observing the baby's facial features more closely while holding him. His eyes, accustomed to seeing various people in court, were used to remembering people's characteristics in detail. He carefully looked at Michael's small nose, eye shape, lip line, and overall facial contours. Suddenly, David's expression changed. He frowned and looked at the baby's face intently once more. With a puzzled expression, he examined Michael's face from different angles. "What's wrong?" Rebecca noticed her husband's change and asked. "No, it's nothing," David answered hastily, though his expression was still confused. "I might just be tired." However, in David's mind, a strong sense of unease was spreading. Michael's facial features resembled someone in his memory. That someone was a defendant in a bigamy case he had handled several years ago. But that had to be a coincidence. People can have similar facial features. David doubted his own memory. However, the face of that man he had encountered numerous times in court was vividly etched in his memory. The distinctive nose shape, the spacing between eyes and eyebrows, and the lip shape. Michael's features bore too strong a resemblance to that man. "David, are you okay?" Amanda asked with concern. "You look pale." "Yes, I'm fine," David answered with a forced smile. "I'm just moved by how cute the baby is." However, doubts were growing in his mind. Perhaps Mark wasn't who he thought he was. But that was probably overthinking. Mark was an honest, loving husband who truly loved Amanda. There was no way such a person could be a bigamist. David tried to return the baby to Mark. "What a beautiful baby. Mark, you'll have a happy family." At that moment, David saw Mark's hand. As he received the baby, David could see the wedding ring on his left ring finger. However, David remembered that the defendant in that bigamy case also wore a similar wedding ring. Furthermore, Mark had a small scar on his wrist. This was a distinctive scar that the defendant in that case also had. David's heart began beating violently. This was too much of a coincidence to explain away. However, he still couldn't be certain. Perhaps his memory was becoming vague. "Rebecca," David spoke to his wife in a low voice. "I need to talk to you outside for a moment." "Huh? Now?" Rebecca was confused. "Is there some urgent matter?" "It's just a work issue," David answered with a forced smile. "Just for 5 minutes." Amanda and Mark were a bit surprised, but understood it was David's work matter. "Thank you for coming despite your busy schedule," Mark expressed his gratitude. Rebecca sensed her husband's urgency and said to Amanda, "We'll be right back," before leaving the room with David. Once in the hallway, David suddenly became very serious. His face was pale, and his hands were trembling slightly. "Rebecca, call the police right now." "What? Why?" Rebecca stared at her husband, completely unable to understand. "David, what on earth is going on? Didn't you notice?" David's voice was shaking. "That baby is..." He couldn't continue his words. David's face was pale, and sweat was beading on his forehead. His condition was abnormal, and Rebecca couldn't understand what was happening at all. "David, please explain," Rebecca desperately pleaded with her husband. "Why do we need to call the police? What about Michael?" David took a deep breath and looked directly into his wife's eyes. "Rebecca, this is very difficult to say. But I think Mark is the defendant from a bigamy case I handled 3 years ago." "Bigamy?" Rebecca looked incredulous. That can't be right. Mark was single before marrying Amanda. We even met his family. That's the problem, David continued in a low voice. Bigamists often use different identities with multiple women. Michael's facial features are too similar to Richard Morgan, the defendant in that case. Especially the nose shape, eye spacing, and even the wrist scar match. Rebecca didn't want to believe her husband's story. However, David's observational skills and memory, honed in court, were reliable. He rarely made mistakes. But if it's really true... Rebecca couldn't continue her words. Amanda's marriage would be legally invalid, David answered heavily. And Michael would legally be considered an illegitimate child. While the two were discussing, police patrol cars arrived at the hospital parking lot. When Rebecca had called, she mentioned that David was a lawyer and there was suspicion of bigamy, so the police responded quickly. Chicago police detectives Johnson and Harris entered the hospital. Detective Johnson was an experienced detective in his 50s who specialized in family crimes. Detective Harris was a young female detective skilled in victim care. "Your attorney Hamilton," Detective Johnson greeted while checking the business card. "You mentioned suspicion of bigamy. Could you explain in detail?" David explained in detail about the Richard Morgan case he had handled 3 years ago. In that case, it was discovered that a man named Richard Morgan was simultaneously maintaining married life with 3 women. He told each woman different occupations and backgrounds, skillfully hiding his true identity. Richard Morgan told all 3 wives that he worked in construction, David explained. And he said he had frequent business trips due to work, using that as an excuse to move between each home. "What similarities do you see with the current suspect Mark Wilson?" Detective Harris asked. "The physical characteristics are very similar, plus his occupation is also construction-related, and he talks about frequent business trips," David answered. "And the newborn's facial features are very similar to Richard Morgan." The detectives decided to return to the police station temporarily to check case records. Meanwhile, David and Rebecca had to return to the hospital room. They needed to act naturally so Amanda and Mark wouldn't suspect anything. Returning to the room, Amanda looked worried. "Are you okay? I was concerned when you suddenly left." "I'm sorry," Rebecca answered, trying to stay calm. "David's office had an emergency call. But everything's fine now." Mark was comforting the baby while greeting them with a smile. "Thank you for your hard work." Seeing that smile, Rebecca felt conflicted. If David's suspicion was correct, this man was a fraud who was deceiving Amanda. An hour later, Detective Johnson called. After investigating the police database, they found no criminal record under the name Mark Wilson, but they wanted to conduct fingerprint verification. They also discovered that one of the aliases Richard Morgan had used in the past was Mark Wilson. "This is likely not a coincidence," Detective Johnson explained over the phone. "We'll proceed with the investigation carefully, but in case the suspect tries to flee the hospital, we're positioning security." The next afternoon, police officially began investigating Mark's identity. They cooperated with hospital security staff and established surveillance to prevent Mark from leaving the hospital. To ensure Amanda and the baby's safety, plainclothes officers were stationed in the ward. Around 3 p.m., Detectives Johnson and Harris visited the hospital room. Amanda was confused, not understanding what was happening. "You're Mark Wilson, aren't you?" Detective Johnson spoke politely. "We'd like to ask you some questions for identity verification." Mark's face stiffened momentarily. "Is there some problem?" "This is a routine investigation," Detective Harris answered calmly. "Could we see your birth certificate and identification?" Mark hesitantly took out his driver's license from his wallet. However, when the detectives requested more detailed identity verification, his attitude suddenly changed. "Actually, I have urgent business to attend to," Mark stood up frantically. "Amanda, I need to go back to the company for a moment." "But you said you took the day off," Amanda looked at her husband strangely. At that moment, Detective Johnson showed Mark an old photograph he was holding. It was an arrest photo of Richard Morgan from 3 years ago. Do you know the man in this photograph? Mark's face turned completely pale. He looked at the photograph and was clearly shaken. I don't know him, Mark answered in a trembling voice. I really am in a hurry. Mark Wilson, or should I say Richard Morgan, Detective Johnson said quietly. You're under arrest on suspicion of bigamy. The hospital room was momentarily enveloped in silence. Amanda couldn't understand what was happening and stared at her husband with a dazed expression. What are you talking about? Amanda shouted in confusion. Mark committing bigamy. That's impossible. Detective Harris gently explained to Amanda. I'm sorry, but this man is already married to 2 other women, and your marriage to him is legally invalid. Amanda looked at Mark with an expression of disbelief. That's a lie, right? Mark, this is some mistake, right? Explain it to me. Mark dropped his shoulders as if giving up. Amanda, I'm sorry. The only thing that was true was that I loved you. Loved? Amanda screamed through tears. That's it. You have multiple wives, and you loved me. Police confiscated evidence and took Mark away. Left in the hospital room were Amanda, who collapsed in tears, and the confused Rebecca and David. Rebecca, Amanda called out in a trembling voice. Was my marriage fake? What's going to happen to Michael? Rebecca embraced Amanda. It's okay, we're here. Michael is your precious child. That will never change. However, reality was harsh. Amanda's marriage was legally invalid, and Michael would legally be considered an illegitimate child. Furthermore, the existence of Mark's other wives was revealed, creating a mountain of complex legal problems. That night, David spoke to his wife. We have to support Amanda and Michael. Legal procedures, emotional support, we have to do everything. Of course, Rebecca answered. Family isn't just about blood relations. Supporting each other in times of trouble is what real family means. In the hospital's newborn nursery, Michael slept quietly. 1 year later, Chicago's streets were wrapped in golden autumn foliage. In Rebecca and David's living room, 1-year-old Michael was toddling, trying to walk toward his uncle's knees. Watching this adorable sight, Amanda wore a peaceful smile. Michael, you're doing great, Amanda encouraged her son. Can you walk all the way to Uncle David? This past year had been the most difficult period of Amanda's life. After Mark's arrest, he was convicted of bigamy and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Additionally, he became liable for compensation to the other victim women. Amanda's marriage was declared legally invalid, and she suffered great wounds both legally and emotionally. During the first few months, Amanda was in deep despair. Her distrust of men was strong, and she was tormented by humiliation over being so thoroughly deceived. However, Michael's existence supported her. And above all, Rebecca and David's unconditional love and support became the force that helped her recover. At first I thought I didn't know what would become of me, but now I can feel hope for a new life, Amanda said while holding Michael. Having this child makes every day meaningful. David provided full support to Amanda in legal matters. Child custody, child support claims, and compensation claims for damages from the fraudulent marriage. He solved complex legal problems one by one. Through his expertise and connections, Amanda was able to build a financially stable situation. You're truly a strong woman, David said to Amanda. Seeing how much you've grown this past year, I respect you from the bottom of my heart. Rebecca also used her experience as a nurse to support Michael's health management and childcare. When Michael cried in the middle of the night, when Amanda was tired, she always rushed over to help. The days of 3 people cooperating to raise a child created new bonds that transcended conventional concepts of family. I really learned this year that family isn't just about blood relations or legal relationships, Amanda said thoughtfully. You and David are Michael's and my real family. Amanda had started working at a new beauty salon 6 months ago. Her colleagues understood her situation and flexibly accommodated things like work schedule adjustments. When Michael got sick or there were sudden matters to attend to, Rebecca and David supported her, so she could work with peace of mind. "The people at my new workplace adore Michael too," Amanda reported happily. "Everyone says, what a lovely son. Having so many people who love him is truly happiness for Michael." Michael was growing into a healthy, active child. He had become good at walking and was starting to speak simple words. He especially used the words mama, uncle, and auntie frequently, delighting all 3 adults. "This child has no memory of his father, but he has many family members who love him," Rebecca said while gently stroking Michael's head. "I'm sure a child raised in an environment full of love will become a wonderful adult." David had recently been putting effort into supporting victims of fraudulent marriage and bigamy cases, using his expertise in family law. Amanda's experience had become valuable knowledge for helping other victims. Difficult experiences, when overcome, can become the power to help others, David said while looking at his wife and Amanda. "What our family has experienced might become hope for people in similar circumstances." When dinner time came, the 3 adults and Michael gathered around the dining table. Michael sat in his high chair, skillfully using a spoon to eat. Watching this heartwarming scene, Amanda felt truly happy. "A year ago, I didn't know how to protect this child's future," Amanda said tearfully. "But now I'm confident that this child is growing up surrounded by love. Mutual support and continuing to love unconditionally is far more important than blood relations or legal relationships." That night, after Michael fell asleep, the 3 adults sat in the living room drinking coffee and talking. The new form of family they had built through overcoming difficulties was bound together by deep bonds that transcended conventional concepts. "A real family is a relationship where people support each other in times of trouble and continue to love unconditionally," Rebecca said quietly. "We've proven that." Outside the window, Chicago's night scene sparkled quietly. In the house where little Michael's sleeping breath could be heard, 3 adults held hope for a new tomorrow in their hearts. Their story, having learned the meaning of true family, was about to welcome a new chapter.